Hi, everyone. Welcome to Poetry Superhighway Live. My name is Rick Lupert. Glad to have you with us uh, today. Normally on Poetry Superhighway Live, it's an open reading. Hi, everyone. And, ooh, there's my voice again. No one wants to hear me twice, especially not me. Normally, we do an open reading on Poetry Superhighway Live, and people are invited to join in and read poems. And I'm a big fan of the open reading and hoping and helping to develop community and connections between poets when through the open reading. So that's going to continue, and our next open reading will be next month on August 23rd. We'll continue doing that every month, but today is a special edition because we just launched our poetry contest, the annual poetry contest. I think it's the 29th year. I always forget to make a note of that. Um, it could be the 30th. I'm pretty sure it's the 29th, so don't get too excited, everyone. And we're going to have a conversation with our poetry contest judges in just a minute. I have them on hand, standing by, ready to share some of their insights about what they're looking for when they read the work that you're submitting to the contest, as well as learning who they are and hearing some poems from them too. So it's going to be a great hour or so of conversation. A little information about the contest before we get going. First of all, Poetry Superhighway Live, it's 20 years old. The website is older, the publication is older, but just obsessed with keeping track of these kinds of statistics. And this is the 20th year that Poetry Superhighway Live has existed. In fact, the very first PSH live event was this conversation 20 years ago with a different set of judges. So excited that we've been going this long. Glad that you're with us. As I mentioned, the next one will be our open reading on August 23rd, and the open reading happens almost every month, with the exception of this show and the contest winners announcement, which will happen in October. The contest is off to a great start. We have 72 sponsors in this contest so far who've offered 176 different prizes, books of poetry, services of interest to poets, cool things like that, digital things, physical things, all something within the world of if you're a poet, you probably would think this is pretty cool to get this. And the reason why we do that is because every single person who enters the contest gets a prize just for entering, regardless of whether you win the contest or not, regardless of what your score is. So it's kind of a win for you, whether you enter the contest with one poem for $1 or 10 poems for $10. It's $1 per poem entry fee. You will get something just for entering, thanks to the generosity of these many sponsors. Our judges, who are going to join us in just a second, um, will attest to the fact that the contest is already a success in terms of the number of entries have come in. 192 poems have been sent so far, which is we're ahead of last year at this point. That's great news in terms of participation in the contest. The judges are probably like, can we slow down a little bit? Because it's quite a lot that's being sent to them on an almost daily basis. They read your poems. Your names are removed once I receive your contest payment, and they get sent a batch every day of all the poems that are sent in that day and paid for that day. They get a title list. They get all the poems, and they send back the title list with scores. They score them from 0 to 5 using quarter point intervals. And at the end, someone wins the contest. We have three winners. Sometimes that leads to a short second tie-breaking round to determine who those are. Those three winners divide up 100% of the entry fees. So, for example, if 1,000 poems come in, that's $1,000. 50% of that goes to our first place winner, 30% of it goes to the second place, and 20% to the third place winner. They get published as the winners of the contest and Poets of the Week that week. And they have the dubious honor of being invited to judge the following year's contest. This year, two of last year's winners accepted that invitation. Matthew Feinstein from Tracy, California, and Climbing Sun from Boca Raton, Florida, and Elise Versella, who came in fourth place in last year's contest, which is no slouchy thing to mention at all, is also here, and she is our third judge. So really glad to have all of you with us today. Let me switch to gallery mode so folks can see you. Hello to the three of you. Feel free to unmute and say hi.
Hi.
Hello.
All right, that's three hellos. Perfect. You've answered the first question correctly. So, you're gonna guide us through this conversation. I really appreciate your time, by the way. I know it's quite a lot of work that's come your way already, and we're just in the first part of the contest. I know it's a lot of work, and I really appreciate your time in doing that work as well as your time this afternoon and being part of this conversation. You could be out in the sun somewhere. I think that especially applies to Climbing Sun, who lives in Florida and who would much rather be on his surfboard in the ocean. So thank you for coming inside for us, Climbing Sun. We appreciate that. So first question, and we're going to go through. I've got your names in an order, and I'm going to switch the order every time. So everyone's going to go first a number of times, just so you know. Starting alphabetically by first name. That's a heads up, Elise. You're going to be first here, just so you know. So first, we'd like to get to know you guys. And the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for a living, and how you came to poetry? So that's sort of a three-part question: what you do, um, and how you came to poetry. Anything else you want to tell us about yourself, Elise? Hello.
Hello. Well, a little bit about myself and what I do. What I do is completely separate from poetry. It has no artistic merit at all. I'm a call center operator by day. And I came to poetry very simply because when I was growing up, speaking was hard for me and getting my feelings out was hard for me. So I took to writing letters and poetry followed, and we've just pursued that ever since.
That's amazing. People need people to answer the phone when they call, so I would not downplay the importance of that. I know, when I actually choose to make a phone call, which is rarely, I hate talking on the phone. I really want someone there and not like a guided section of buttons to press to get to other recordings. So your work
True.
is essential. You're an essential worker, at least.
Thank you. It's
Sure.
appreciated.
Climbing Sun, how about you? What do you do or did you do if you're still not doing what you did and how did you come to poetry?
Well, I guess I'm having a hyperactive retirement, a lot of which is in the ocean. I'm addicted to, I used to be a surfer, but now I'm addicted to body surfing and warm water. So that's why I moved here from California, where I spent easily 40 years designing uh, and building custom homes. I even built a big shrine modeled on a shrine in India and all kinds of stuff like that. I was the guy that did all the crazy stuff that nobody else uh, wanted to be called crazy doing. So that was that part. I also, for 22 years, taught, well, longer than that, but at this one Santa Cruz Montessori school, I taught a winter workshop, writing workshop for junior high kids. And that was one of the hardest things to leave California, leaving that behind. And it was just hard. And so, I like left brain, right brain stuff, mathematics, engineering, and then on the other side, poetry. And I came to poetry in fifth grade. I uh, I wrote a poem. They said, "Hey, write a poem for this contest." And I'll be darned if I didn't place really high in the contest. It was about the Mackinac Bridge. And after that, I was hooked. So first thing I did when I when I got out of college was start writing seriously and haven't stopped. That was in 1969. So that pretty much sums me up.
Wow, that was the year after I was born. I'd like to see the poems that you wrote about that event, by the way. Cool. What a great story. And moving from sunny California to sunny Florida is kind of a cool thing as well. Glad you're here. Thank you for all that. Matthew, how about you?
Well, for a living, I work at a biotech company in Phoenix, Arizona. I work in the clinical services department, pretty like basic data entry stuff. It's 120 degrees outside, so I haven't been going outside really. Uh, when I came to poetry, it was I had started an English degree like in my associates when I was in college, and then then I was in my bachelor's program in at Cal State Long Beach, and I was almost fully done with the program. And I did go creative writing, but I wasn't really like it was the kind of thing where I was like I don't write anything other than like what I'm required to write like for class. But then I took a poetry class in spring of 2019, and that was like my second to last semester, and it just like I had no real background with poetry. I never wrote poetry, like did not read poetry, like I had very little exposure to poetry, and even in high school I didn't do anything with poetry. um and it just kind of hooked me. I mean, it really did. And next thing I knew, I was just like spending a lot of time writing poetry. And then I realized, oh, like there's something here in regards to like how I can develop my voice. And it was, yeah. And so, ever since then, I've just been, from the beginning, really, I've been trying to write seriously and just like publish seriously. So, yeah.
That's great. Started from a young age. What I'm hearing from in terms of what you're all doing here is that poetry doesn't pay the bills, and that seems to be an
Not
important.
yet.
Not yet. No, I mean, I think probably very rarely d does it for most people. So I think that's an important thing to hear. And I'm always curious about how people measure their success as a poet. I think, there's early on there might be an idea that once you've start in this and once you get a sense that you might be kind of good at it, a hope or expectation that, this is going to be it. I'm going to make my fortune as a poet. I'm going to rise to the top. But I think the people who are the most successful as poets, with just few very few exceptions at the very top, still have to have jobs. You know what I'm saying? So there's something to keep in mind. Um, all right. Well, great answers to that first question. Good to know you guys. I don't think I mentioned where everyone is from. Matthew, you're in Tracy, California, climbing sun. You're in Florida, and Elise, you're in the Bronx, right? So we've got the whole country covered in terms, at least the continental states covered. So we could get to anywhere in the middle quickly if we needed to, depending on which one of us started. So,
I live in Phoenix. I'm just from Tracy, by the way.
oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, good to know. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, That's still a good base for the West Coast, I think, just about.
Perfect.
You're
All right.
you're often in the same time zone as us for part of the year, so very good. Okay. I wanted to ask you about your experience in poetry contests. I know you all have at least entered one poetry contest. Do you enter many contests in general? What is your experience with contests? Um, full disclosure, this question I used to ask, like specifically, is there anything different about the Poetry Superhighway contest or your experience in our contest? But it feels a little self-serving and not helpful because everyone generally gave the same answer, like, oh, it's great and it's different and blah blah blah. And you guys undoubtedly having risen so highly in last year's contest have nice things to say about it. So I don't necessarily need you to uh, wax glowingly about this contest. Maybe a more general answer about how you feel about poetry contests and your experience entering them, if that makes sense. And Matthew, you get to go first this time.
I mean, I think in a lot of ways, poetry contests sometimes are a crapshoot. Depends on how competitive it is. It depends on like the caliber of poems being sent out. Contests normally aren't don't cost a dollar per like don't cost a dollar. So there's definitely a pay to play there for some of the more, I guess you can say like, national. Well, I mean, this is international, but like, stuff like Frontier Poetry's contest where they're offering like $5,000 or Rattle's $15,000 poetry prize or Beloit Journal I think does one. Like there's, plenty that are um kind of like badges of honor, so to speak, I guess, like very big credits if you get them. But I think that the quality of the poem only goes so far. There's just a lot of different hands on it. Usually with contests and with journals in general, it's like the reader and then it's the editor and then it's like a final judge sometimes. So I guess like logistically, I mean, it's like I do submit to poetry contests. And I only usually, except for some places like Poetry Superhighway, I've always done it. One of the reasons is because it's very accessible in regards to kind of like entry fees. But when it comes to like kind of the standard way of like how poetry contests are run, which are they can get pretty costly, is like I'm very conscientious of like, okay, do I actually have something that I think is good enough to get there, because I think that it's like you really have to look at the poem itself and be like, is I'm gonna be honest with myself, is this like actually gonna place? Um, yeah.
Cool, good insights there. Elise, how about you? What's your experience in contests?
Ooh, I feel like I'm gonna second everything Matthew's just said. Yeah, they get quite pricey. You do have to be very honest with yourself as to, is this poem good enough? It's also very hard to judge, what they're actually looking for, which you should be reading, independent journals of poetry to, yes, when they say read our work to get an idea of what we're interested in. Yeah, that's very beneficial. Otherwise, you probably are going to be wasting 25 or so dollars on a contest. It is very much a pay to play kind of, pool. And sometimes, I think as poets and artists, we do sometimes let the self-doubt creep in. So it is a balance of, do I try? Does this actually suck? Sometimes there are just, sometimes there are ones if you can afford it, you're just like, oh, fuck it, just we'll send it in and see what happens. Because again, so much of it is relative to who's reading and judging it. So don't like sell yourself short, but also, yeah, I think at first I was submitting poems just to see if they would get in print. But then if those print journals then do have contests, I think at this point in my poetry career, I am trying to submit to all of the contests.
Cool. Yeah, that's a really good insight. And knowing that it's sort of like based on the sensibility of the person reading it, and that could change from contest to contest. And I think about this a lot, in particular when submitting your work anywhere. It's so important to read the where you're submitting, because if I don't know, to put it really simply, if they publish only rhyming poetry and you submit some free verse, odds are they're not going to take your work, no matter how good it is. And so, if you find a kinship with what you're reading in a publication, it's more likely that they'll be more receptive to your work. And I think that's good advice for people who get rejected a lot, too, or at all, which is all of us, because the rejections are much more significant than acceptances in no matter how successful you are. That really, it's just one person sometimes, who's looked at your work and said, "Oh, that's not for me." That doesn't mean that another person isn't going to read it and really, really dig it. So, good tip there. Climbing Sun, how about you in contests? We already know you won your very first contest in fifth grade.
Well, thanks. Yeah, it was such a joy. I was driving across Alligator Alley coming back to the east coast of Florida from the west coast of Florida and wasn't near my uh, devices. So I didn't know till I turned on my computer, which when you were completed in that hour. Anyhow, it was a pleasant shock. I have a little bit of advice for people. First of all, that are submitting, to build up your own, um, how do I want to say this, self-credibility. Um, I think what I've done in the past, over the past 10 years, is submit, two or three poems here and there to a lot of different journals. And I've gotten published in a number of them. And when that first one happens, and then the next one, and then, three or four a year, you start to realize that yes, I am a poet. My work is worthy. And, you know, that's a good thing. So I'm not shy now about submitting, but the important thing I think to do, in not only reading whatever journal it is, but I always research the judges and find out and read their poems and see where they're coming from and try to customize what I'm doing um, to their sensibilities. So, uh, and I have been published in, there wasn't a cash prize, but I've gotten published in some anthologies that are, one up on the West Coast called the Poetry Box. They published me in an anthology of theirs. Great outfit. And so there's a lot of ways to win, I guess is what I'm saying. You don't have to win the big prize or even the middle range prize or whatever prize it is. But I uh, I do think that it's important to keep doing that, because when you do hit upon, even if it's one
Ooh,
poem in
Climbing
a
Sun.
journal, yeah.
Okay, you cut off a little bit at there at the end. I'm not sure if that was your connection
Oh,
or mine, but would
okay.
you mind repeating the very last part?
Yeah, just I think it's important um, to keep pressing on submissions, because there'll always be one or two a year, sometimes maybe seven or eight, and it just goes to bolster confidence. And you never know, when you're going to get that judge that's right on your wavelength. So go for it.
That's great advice, and I like the essentially invitation for the population to stalk the three of you basically and learn who you are, and to try to figure out your sensibilities to have the best shot in terms of putting their submissions together. It's good advice. All right, more great answers from you guys. Thank you for all that. I know we've got some folks watching in the YouTube uh, channel right now, and I just want to acknowledge that you're there. And if anyone of you who are watching have any questions that I might not have thought to ask, feel free to ask those in the chat at YouTube, and I will pass those on to our judges as our time allows. So moving on, I asked you guys to prepare a couple of poems, and the first one was uh, by another poet, something that you really like. So the question is, who are some of your favorite poets? And then would you read the poem that you picked by another poet and tell us why you picked that poem or that poet? And CS Climbing Sun, it's actually your turn to start.
Okay, well, I have a lot of favorite poets from, Maya Angelou and others like her. And but among the guys, I love Billy Collins. He's just uh, funny, but funny in an enlightened way, I guess I could say. And then there's also Gary Snyder, who's one of the original beat poets that I've when I was teaching at the Montessori school, I always taught him to the kids because he's he's to the point. He doesn't mess around, and then doesn't belabor the work. And then the guy that taught me, his name's Morton Marcus. This is one of his books, and I'm going to read from that. Um, he was poet in residence in a small college in Santa Cruz when I arrived there from Hawaii to take up residence. And um, he's a master of, among other things, prose poems. I'm not going to read a prose poem of his, but I will say that um, he has a lot written about how to do them. And so I've taken that to heart. But here's one of his, in my opinion, better ones. It's not long, and it's called How Would You Touch the Body of God? How would you touch the body of God? By clamping your palm on his contours like a roller coaster hurtling down its tracks? Or like a blind man by skimming your fingertips along the base of a mountain range? I, for one, think that his body is the edge of the universe, and I would finger it accordingly, like a tailor testing a fabric. Oh, yes, we know the likelihood of finding him is rare, but we keep in practice anyway. That is why we touch each other's lives as often as we can, leaving our words and fingerprints on each other's breath. And why, when we remove our hands, our thumbs are radiant, gorged with static, and our index fingers waver like wands.
Mhm.
It's a great example of hands-on poetry there, Climbing Sun. Thank you for that beautiful poem. Thanks for sharing it. Matthew, how about you? Favorite poets and who did you bring to us and why?
Yeah, so I mean, some of my favorite poets are, I mean, I like Keats, I like Bridget Begin Kelly, I like Lee Young Lee. Um, I do like Sylvia Plath. Um, I had like a bunch in my head. Ocean Vuong, AI, not the machine, but AI, the persona poet who's masterful at that. Larry Levis. I mean, there are E. E. Cummings. There are so many. Charles Bernstein. There are different. I have a pretty wide range of like people that I like. But I brought a poem by Richard Sykin because I think that it's emblematic of kind of like specifically related to like a lot of my poetry. And also, I mean, I have a point about this, which is, um, yeah, I mean, I'll tell you why when I explain like what I'm looking for, I guess. But this poem feels very similar to like the poem that I placed second in. So, yeah, so this is called I Had a Dream About You. I had a dream about you. All the cows were falling out of the sky and landing in the mud. You were drinking sangria, and I was throwing oranges at you, but it didn't matter. I said, my arms are very long and your head's on fire. I said, kiss me here and here and here, and you did. Then you wanted pasta, so we trampled out into the tomatoes and rolled around to make the sauce. You were very beautiful. We were in the Safeway parking lot. I couldn't find my cigarettes. You said, hurry up, but I was worried there would be a holdup and we would be stuck in a hostage situation, hiding behind the frozen meats with nothing to smoke for hours. You said, don't be silly, so I followed you into the store. We were thumping the melons when I heard somebody say, nobody move. I leaned over and whispered in your ear, I told you so. There was a show on the television about buried treasure. You were trying to convince me that we should buy shovels and go out into the yard, and I was trying to convince you that I was a vampire. On the way to the hardware store, I kept biting your arm, and you said, if I was really a vampire, I would be biting your neck. So I started biting your neck, and you said, cut it out. And you bought me an ice cream, and then we saw the UFO. These are the dreams we should be having. I shouldn't have to clean them up like this. You were lying in the middle of the empty highway. The sky was red and the sand was red, and you were wearing a brown coat. There were flecks of foam in the corners of your mouth. The birds were watching you. Your eyes were closed and were listening to the road, and I could hear you breathing. I could hear your heart beating. I carried you to the car and drove you home, but you weren't making any sense. I took a shower and tried to catch my breath. You were lying on top of the bedspread in boxer shorts, watching cartoons and laughing, but not making any sound. Your skin looked blue in the television light. Your teeth looked yellow. Still wet, I lay down next to you. Your arms, your legs, your naked chest, your ribs delineated like a junkyard dog's. There's nowhere to go, I thought. There's nowhere to go. You were sitting in a bathtub at the hospital and you were crying. You said it hurt. I mean, the buildings that were not the hospital. I shouldn't have mentioned the hospital. I don't think I can take this much longer. In the dream, I don't tell anyone. You put your head in my lap. Let's say you're driving down the road with your eyes closed, but my eyes are also closed. You're by the side of the road. You're by the side of the road and you're doing all the talking while I stare at my shoes. They're nice shoes, brown and comfortable, and I like your voice. In the dream, I don't tell anyone. I'm afraid to wake you up. In these dreams, it's always you, the boy in the sweatshirt, the boy on the bridge, the boy who always keeps me from jumping off the bridge. Oh, the things we invent when we are scared and want to be rescued. Your Jeep, your teeth, the coffee you bought me, the sandwich cut in half on the plate. I woke up and ate ice cream in the dark, hunched over on the wooden chair in the kitchen, listening to the rain. I borrowed your shoes and didn't put them away. You were crying and eating rice. The surface of the water was still and bright. Your feet were burning, so I put my hands on them, but my hands were burning too. You had a bottle of pills, but I wouldn't let you swallow them. You said, will you love me even more when I'm dead? And I said no, and I threw the pills in the sand. Look at them, you said. They look like emeralds. I put you in a cage with the ocelots. I was trying to fatten you up with sausages and bacon. Somehow you escaped and climbed up the branches of a pear tree. I chopped it down, but there was nobody in it. I went to the riverbed to wait for you to show up. You didn't show up. I kept waiting.
Wow, there's so much, so many great images and lines in that poem. I mean, from the very beginning, where it, looked like we're starting off with some intimacy and it went into pasta. It really picked up for me at that point. Loved that. Thank you so much, Matthew. Well done. Elise, how about you?
Okay, also love Richard Steichen, and I think Crush is a fantastic collection of poetry. I'm also really into Olivia Gatwood. Grew up on T.S. Eliot and Whitman, but I also am very lucky to, be friends with so many poets who are constantly inspiring me, and I'm constantly in awe of Ray Hendricks, Penzi Allen, and someone I've recently started reading, Gabrielle Bates. Her poem Strawberries is the one I'll be reading to give you guys an idea of what I like to read and what I'm hoping to see. This is strawberries. A car's tires, the thunk over the rubbery black tripwire at the oil change, triggering a fat bell, and a group of girls in silver leotards are reflected like spatters of sap in its windows, liquidine, firm, gleaming. It's game day. They are the girls chosen to split in tempo to the brass band, heel of a front foot sliding over astroturf, top of a back foot grinding over lit green, cervix slapping the 50-yard line like a fried egg flipped down on a griddle to burn. Behind the bleachers, a boy takes off the shirt of another boy, paints a letter there in red paint. R, and then another boy, IOT. When the sun goes down over the bridge, all the painted boys will make patriots. For now, the sun rises, sanctioning the street. Jiffy Lube, pet store, the Sam super sandwiches. Teens file into practicing the joke of language. The morning is cool on the outside and hot in the restaurant. The war in the words, playful as a war can be, meaning each gut bleeds out like a slit pig's, filling the cracks in linoleum, spilling over, becoming smooth. The layer of red dry and build on one another, and for years, the gap between ceiling and floor lessens. Backs hunched as the mind saws downward, revealing rings. In the parking lot, are you asleep? Says the boy who is not my boyfriend, running his fingers along the band of my underwear. Across the street from this, for years, an ancient tortoise roams the floor of the pet store, closing his army green beak around the red toenails of sandaled women, thinking them strawberries. I feel ashamed for all the moments I've been kind, knowing kindness is all it would take.
Fantastic piece. And I especially loved what you said, the idea that your favorite poets aren't necessarily the famous ones. They're people who you know, they're people who are in your community, who are your colleagues, who you came up or are coming up with. I think that's a really important thing to state, and very much in the spirit of what Poetry Superhighway tries to do as well. So thank you so much for that, Elise. We're going to move on to your poems. I think one of the best ways people can get to know the three of you is through your own work as well. So I asked you to bring a poem of yours to read. And I'm going to just in advance throw out this question, which I didn't let you know about in advance because it showed up in the chat just to give you a chance to think about it. But Hermione, who's a regular participant in our open reading, wants to know what you think about this question. How do you know when a poem is finished? So you don't have to answer that in this next round, but giving you a little advance notice of it for when I do ask you that next. So your own poem, Elise, it's your turn to go first. So let's hear what you got.
All right, this is from my most recent book, Inaccurate Histories, and this one is called A Woman Holds a Vacancy. I am not my mother's firstborn. An argument let the bones of that skeleton tumble out of its closet. My mother's wound, a wounded baby bird starving in the nest. She is not the only one to hold her secret in her chest. My mother's past life is the branch split by the lightning strike. Such thin skin on the newborn bird I notice as it lies crushed in the dirt. My mother's remaining children and her ghosts haunting the room. The unspoken hollows in the family tree, my grandmother's wounded womb, a hysterectomy, a piece of her removed. A woman would carve out her organs until emptied to feel forgiven the heavy sons of the dead son she buries, no photography to immortalize a memory. A mother's remaining children and the ghosts haunting the room. Mother, every year you swallow the moon and a new crater is carved out of you. I know of the craters formed in women who yearn. My aunt, who wished her womb could do more, was told by the doctors a pregnancy would cause more harm to her already ravished insides. A woman's only child and the ghosts haunting the room. Mother, you are planet in gravitational pull. A daughter is the satellite that orbits you. Do not think her devoid of light if her galaxy never breeds stars. Somehow I decided my belly would never be full, a deflated uterine balloon of vacancy, but no one could rent the room. I am not incomplete. If you tie up the tributaries that run through me, I will have no firstborn. There will be nothing to bury or mourn. I will overflow in other ways. A woman remains, exorcising the ghosts from the room.
Wow.
No one can rent the room. Wow. What a powerful piece that you shared there, Elise. Thank you very much for that one. Um, Climbing Sun, what did you bring for us?
Okay, well, I brought I don't know if this is my second or third book. It's called Parables and Myths, and I'm going to read the last parable in that section. It's called Remember the Question. Come with me on a walk over the verge of the apparent world. Trees here talk back. Streams seethe like melted stars. Orchids misbehave like weeds. Common rocks confess their longing to aspire to pure quartz. Katydids and cicadas rage in sync with drums we seldom hear, but whose echo we sense. And half an hour has no meaning while you are held for ransom by a waterfall's dance. An accident has no impact if you can convalesce next to a cobalt ocean. Even a bee sting in this region can lead to rejoicing. Listen. Overhear the growl in your belly tell you it's a mere metaphor for a craving created centuries before you came to know the soil here is spiked and the air is barely able to maintain. This is no patriotic picnic, no designer daydream. This is all about over imbibing your own breath until your rainbow scented sweat becomes a truth serum in reverse, making you admit you are blindfolded. And when handed the proverbial stick, you get the cosmic joke. Your very existence is the only gift in the piñata. Whether you think this is enough is the question. So scale a sacred cliff face or plunge into that wet emerald basin waiting to claim you. It's all breathtaking, all yours. Don't just grin, don't just smile. Catch your echo laughing and let the madness in that laugh tell you the unending repetition of the question is everything.
Nice work, Climbing Sun. Held for ransom by a waterfall's dance was a really cool image. I think we can all relate to, and I love the appearance of the piñata as well that came up later. Nice work, Matthew.
All right. Also, I just want to say Gabrielle Bates, I love her work. Judas Goat and that strawberry poem. Oh, I remember reading. Yeah, I love her. So, uh, I vibe with that. This poem is called Suicide Pact. We traverse the mushroom barren forest and ponder the air, how it's a rental for lungs whose owners will never meet. How one moment my mother's left arm intact, the next her blood on my face. How the blood in the fur of the rotted raccoon on the trail is mere reincarnation. We rehash the suicide awareness assembly, our prepubescent arms smushed together in the cafeteria, sheltered from Central Valley scorch. How counselors gave lectures on reasons to live, how it felt abstract, something about how life takes precedence over becoming a phantom in a house on a chair, awaiting a stranger, a living vagabond to wander in and surrender. So you have something warm, something impermanent to sleep with. We stop for the night. You light the fire pit. So what about you, you ask? When did you know you wanted to die by choice? I say I was 14. What I don't say is I went on Omegle, waited pedophilic cocks until on my screen a girl my age from Italy requested I sing shirtless as a joke. The next day we talked masturbation, how your boyfriend, only 13 years old, raped you, how that night you texted me, look, I fucked up my wrists. My wrists are slit. Look, I felt something. I felt something awful and I want to marry it. I've called your voice so many things. Penetrator of nature, a machine for the ears of deities, a gorilla pounding her chest like she owns the world. And though we're to forfeit our bodies, I wish the pond upstream intact, and frogs trade lily pads like real estate, and flies await death in spider webs, and all greenery a sensorial creature absorbing hiker confessionals, and the guttural grunts of black bears, and the sunset is just sky the color of sherbet. In an alternate reality, I leave you here, allow my crow's feet to blossom like gems at your funeral as I grin at anecdotes of your childhood told by your puffy-eyed sister, how you stole mom's dresses and pranced on the driveway and refused hugs and stole dad's cash in the morning, and at night you shimmied open the window pane to live like a royal degenerate, and for a flicker of time, I think I'm dreaming it all. Your service, the pastor quivering at the podium, your casket agape like an open invitation, the drenched hanky in my fist. In another, we don't fill our pockets with stones, walk into the water like Virginia Woolf, but take pills, and yours are placebos. And at my funeral, a mantis mandibles puncture a beetle outside the temple, and someone we barely knew texts, sorry for your loss. And you shovel a scoopful of dirt atop my pine box. And in another, we lay bare and entangled under the stars, study our fragments of breath, how our moans elongate, their abrupt pitch shift, this duet of vibrations so horny it's novel, so convincing we homicide the pact, leave the wilderness to my backyard, grateful for our nerves as I stroke your cheek in the dark.
Wow, Matthew, a lot of lines I could pull out of that to say wow to. I'm trying to decide between royal degenerate, just because that's always been my goal, I think, to achieve that. Or earlier on in the poem, I felt something awful and I want to marry it. There's a lot to unpack in that line, and I think, yeah, very, very relatable as well. Well done. Great poems, you three. Thank you so much for bringing those, as well as the ones that you brought by the other folks as well. I think that that alone gives really great insights into who you are as poets and what you're looking for. And I hope that hope people take that to heart and really dive into those, or at least read more of your work or their work to expand their own repertoire of poets to be a part of your uh, repertoire again of poets. So I'm realizing we've only got about 10 minutes left and we haven't really got into what it is that you're looking for and that. So I'm gonna kind of throw out sort of a big broad question that maybe encompasses a few of the questions and let you really delve into as much as you want what you might be looking for when you read the poems that are coming in, and maybe also since you've all received almost 200 poems so far, maybe throw in some context about what you've seen so far, if that makes sense. What seems to have worked? What are people doing that you wish may have been been done differently, etc. So it's a really kind of broad question, but overall, this is your chance to say this is what I'm looking for, basically. And Matthew, going to throw it back to you to go first.
Yeah, so I think for me, my this is just how I operate. I mean, as you can tell with my work, and like Richard Sykin, this particular poem, but like for me, I personally like to be like thrust me into a place where you're like metaphorically speaking, like grabbing me by the cheek and like forcing me to look at something that maybe is uncomfortable or is just emotion. Like I like to be wrecked. So if you can wreck me, I mean emotionally wreck me. If you can just dig in, right, to the stuff that plight society or that like, it's art, right? I mean, we're expressing things that we can't do it like in the public square, right? You don't just talk about some of the things that we talk about um in real life, like just like out and about at work, right? And like that's the thing is like for me, the biggest thing is like you need to be able to grab me. You need to be able to I don't want to start reading a poem and then intellectualize it because if I'm intellectualizing it, I'm not feeling it, right? I want the entire world to like stop because of this poem is forcing me, right? It's like literally like grabbing me by the head and saying, "Look," right? And that electricity, I think, above everything else, is what makes poetry poetry, and that's the biggest thing for me. I think Cummings said like the moment you feel, you're not thinking you feel, right? You're not knowing you feel. Like the moment you feel, you're nobody but yourself, right?
Yeah.
And um I find myself I've kind of started resubscribing to an ethos that I wasn't subscribed to before, and this is why I picked Richard Sykin is because and the poem that I read because it's a little more long-winded. Like I used to write poems that are very like focused on like word economy, but the reality is it's like if something is on a line level superb, but it doesn't feel there's no electricity, there's no oomph to it, like for me, you need to speak to something deeper than my intellect. And then of course, originality in language, I think is another big thing. I mean, you know, the more you read poetry, like for journals and like for like magazine, anything like when you start reading submissions, you start realizing, oh, like it's very easy to, as like somebody on the outside who's like submitting work, it's like there's a lot of the same. And so like in order to actually get to a point where you can write something that's truly pops out is like you have to go within yourself and be able to weed out all those cliches and write something that only you can write. So anyways, grip me with your words in a way where I feel that electricity because those are the poems that I'm gonna rank highly. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that's a really clear picture on that. And just as a side note, if you have a forthcoming collection, please consider "Wreck Me" as a title, Matthew. That's really good.
Well, it's called the Nirvana Burning Brings, but
You
yeah.
got a lot more books than you, I suspect. But yeah, thank you for all that. Elise, how about you?
Yeah, I would second Matthew. I want your first line to like hook me. And then I'm a sucker for end lines. I think at least I've been told I do a final stanza pretty damn well. I want your final like lines to gut me like a fish. I want to feel like I've been punched in the gut reading your poem. And I mean like I don't have a preference on like a long poem or a short poem. It needs to pay off in the end. So you can write like a 3 or 4 page poem and I'll read it if you like have really interesting metaphor, again, language, originality. Also, I really love chewy sentences. Like I'm reading your poems out loud and I want to hear like the rhythm and how it feels in my mouth. Like poetry is playing with language, so play with the way it sounds, different word rhythm. Um, I love poem. I'm particularly thinking about one poem that I rated very highly because of the way it sounded when I said it aloud. Like it just felt so good in my mouth to say these short, clipped, rhyming words that all just fit together very nicely and it was impactful. Yeah, just your imagery. Show me something new, teach me something new. I love a poem that I can learn something from. Yeah, take me into a little, I feel like poems can be tiny little stories. So like tell me a story, but hit me at the end.
Um, the title of your future book is Gut Me Like a Fish, just so you know. Yeah, that's really good. Speaking your poems out loud, I can't advocate reading poems at open mics enough. Because you hear them, you hear whether it sounds right to you, and that's really amazing that you read the poems out loud as they come in. That's a great way to to get to know them. I really appreciate that a lot. Climbing Sun, what are you looking for?
Well, I'll say this, like children, every poem is different. And I don't necessarily have a genre or anything like that. I just like to evaluate each poem on its own merit, how it behaves, so to speak, to keep the children metaphor. Overall, the goal of any poem for me is, does it cause the reader or the listener to see the world a little or a lot differently than what they did before they heard the poem? That to me is a game changer. Do you see the world through a different lens than that the poem helped create? And then I do believe that all poems have a rhythm that they are born with. And so my best advice is tune into the rhythm of your poem, not necessarily your rhythm, but the poem's rhythm. This is poet-centric type stuff. And eliminate any word or phrase which throws off that rhythm. As people in my poetry group know, the word and is often a rhythm violator. And when you start out, a little background or pre-framing might be desired. If you must, though, do it quickly without giving the meaning away. And let the reader do a little work. Don't be afraid to let them do a little work, and don't overburden them with too much obscurity. There's so much obscurity out there now that you read something and it's like, what did it say? And so there's also a case to be made for clarity. The poems I believe that we heard from the three of us today were big on clarity. Once you're on a clear channel, don't lose that. It's really important. And especially if you've developed a theme or an overriding metaphor, stay with that. Every line should be consistent with either that theme or that metaphor. Uh, and then to address the person that asked about endings, listen carefully to the poem for an ending. The poem will often tell you where it wants to end. Many an excellent poem, including ones I've read in this competition, ramble on past where they probably should have ended. And if you let it go too far, you'll weaken its effect. And this is usually apparent on the second or third reading. And what I mean by that is read your own poems to yourself out loud before you turn them loose out there. Um, and then it's a simple but effective editing technique, and it's painfully easy to spot if the poet hasn't taken the time to listen to their own poem coming to life aloud. So anyway, that's it for me.
That's quite a lot and really good specific tips there. And just on a big general note, I appreciate what you started with. You try to appreciate each poem on its own merit. Undoubtedly, you're reading poems that you wouldn't write or necessarily seek out to read. And it's a challenge as a judge to see if you can find its voice and whether it works on its own terms. So I appreciate you calling that out. We're right at the top of the hour here, and I'm conscious of your time, but I wanted to just ask one other quick question, answer as briefly as you want. But just, you're receiving these poems, you're asked to put a number on them between 0 and 5, really specifically using quarter point intervals, and that ultimately will determine who wins the contest. Are there any like technical aspects or specifics, punctuation, spelling, or anything at all that might, very specifically affects a point's score going up and down? Climbing Sun.
Well, one of my pet peeves is when you are modifying a noun with a couple of words that when put together you almost never see. And so those words ought to be hyphenated. If it's an odd adjective that you're constructing, hyphenate the two words so that it lets me know and your readers know that uh, hey, these aren't nouns. These are two words that I've chosen, even though one of them may be a noun. These are two words that I've chosen to modify this larger noun. So that's a big one for me. There's probably some other ones, but I know time is limited, so
That's a good point. Both of those, that time is limited, and the actual point you made as well. Matthew, how about you?
Um, just avoiding language that's like tonally takes me out of the poem. So it's like if the like is there like one colloquial line in an otherwise more formal poem, or is it basically a Billy Collins poem with like a couple of lines that first like that are somehow feel more elevated in language, right? Like so, like just trying to like be intentional with, and again, that could work, right? But the question is like, is it working for this poem? So just really thinking about the reader in that regard, I think is really important. Um, I mean, I'm not huge, of course, like you should proofread your stuff, but also like I like some unconventional punctuation and stuff. Just make sure that everything has a logic. So like if you're not going to capitalize the I, there should be no I in there. But if like for some reason like the poem is like the I is like now not the speaker, but like, I don't know, like it's in italics and it's like the mom talking or or like this like other figure talking and the I is capitalized, right? Like that internal logic is fine, but there has to be a reason for any sort of inconsistency or any sort of like convention being completely like tossed out the window, I guess.
That makes a lot of sense. I personally am guilty of when I do stray from what's happening earlier in the poem, just italicizing that, say, look, I did this on purpose. So, but it's good advice, Matthew. Elise, how about you?
I think mostly I'm judging based on like the meat of the story in your poem. Um, Definitely giving extra points for an attempt at form. I think I might be the least classically trained poet here, and my grammar is never really that great. Editors are employed for a reason. So I'm not giving like I'm not deducting too many points on like that. It is only if it like makes me stop reading the poem. I'm like, oh, was if it yeah, if it takes you out, I'm like, no, that messed up my flow. But other than that, yeah, you just gotta wow me. And like yeah, don't don't go in for like the cliches. Try to do something different with the imaging and the metaphors and the wording. Yeah.
It's good advice. Avoid cliche, and avoid saying things which have already been said, I guess, is what we're talking about there. We could probably have a good contest to see who's the least educated poet here. So maybe that's a separate event, at least, that we could participate in. Something to think about. Guys, I really appreciate your time. Do you have like any final words? And that's the last question I'll ask because I know we're past time here. Anything that you didn't get a chance to say that you'd like to say, or anything of that nature, And Elise, I'll throw it back to you if you have anything.
Just read so much poetry.
That's super advice. Super advice. Climbing Sun.
Just know that you are a poet and write from that point of view and listen to the poem mainly. Listen to each poem you're writing because they're all different. They're like kids, like I said, and then express it to its fullest.
Right.
Encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Matthew, how about you?
Write poems that are not just there to be for like the sake of it. Like if it's just like a if it's all about like nature and there's no other like meat to it, like ask yourself, why is the poem also like around or alive, or like, or specifically like, why are you submitting this to somebody for somebody else to read? If that makes sense. What are you trying to tell them? What are you trying, what do you want the poem to do to that person?
Yeah,
For this,
it's a good reminder. It's like it's about the art in your poem and not about you exactly, you know? And I
yeah,
think sometimes that gets lost when we're out there trying to pimp our own work and find our own place in publications and open mics. It's really about the artwork itself.
yes.
Um, Guys, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate your time today. I appreciate the many hours you've already spent reading the 192 poems which have been sent your way so far. I appreciate in advance the significantly large amount of hours which are forthcoming between now and the deadline of the contest, which I think is September 26th. I'm not sure anyone should quote me on that. It's the kind of thing I really should have written down in advance, but it is written down on the website, and whatever it is says there is the deadline. Please consider entering the contest. Everyone gets something for entering. If you win, you'll get a cash prize, and you'll be invited to judge the next year's contest. And the three folks who are here today were winners or scored very highly in last year's contest, and they were not previous judges, so the sensibility keeps changing and changing with this contest. Uh, Elise, Matthew, and Climbing Sun, I really appreciate your sensibilities and time today. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's an honor to judge this contest and be entrusted by everyone to do so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everyone for watching, whether you watched live or you're watching later on YouTube. Again, our next show will be just our regular Poetry Superhighway Live open reading, August 23rd, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, and not sure what time zone we'll be in Phoenix at that point.